Dragon Ball Daima is finally here, as episode 1 just premiered, and with it has come a lot of controversy and confusion. This confusion primarily revolving around when Dragon Ball Daima takes place in the overall Dragon Ball timeline. Some people are confused about when it takes place, with some believing it takes place before Dragon Ball Super, after Dragon Ball Super, or even during Dragon Ball Super. I've even seen some people online saying it's an alternate timeline, non-canon, or a what-if story, and honestly that just isn't the case. When you analyze the show and the context around it, we are told directly when Dragon Ball Daima takes place in the timeline, and I'm here to elaborate on that to make it clear just when Dragon Ball Daima takes place in the Dragon Ball timeline. To begin, Dragon Ball Daima is not a what-if story or a non-canon story. Dragon Ball does have a very messy canon, and there's no true Dragon Ball canon, but Toriyama didn't put this much work and effort into a series for people to call it a what-if story or something that didn't actually happen in the overall scheme of things. It was deliberately placed in a time period where no events took place for several years that we knew about. So when does Daima take place? Well, in the first episode of Dragon Ball Daima, we see Goku and the gang together celebrating. But what is it that they're celebrating? They are there celebrating Trunks' birthday, and Trunks is asked directly how old he is, and he tells us. And his answer tells us directly when Dragon Ball Daima takes place. Trunks states that he is turning 9 years old. But how does this directly tell us when Daima takes place, and how do we know when it takes place? Just based off Trunks' age. Well, let's rewind a little bit, all the way back to the early Android saga when Future Trunks makes his debut. When Future Trunks arrives to warn Goku and the others of the androids' impending arrival in the future, he tells us when he himself will be born in the present timeline, and exactly when the androids will arrive. When talking to Goku, Future Trunks states directly that he will be born in 2.5 years and that the androids will arrive in 3 years. Knowing all this context of when he is born and when the androids arrived, we know that present Trunks, as a baby, is 6 months old during the Cell Saga, as Trunks himself directly stated that he was born about half a year before the androids' first arrival. But we also have further evidence for just how old Trunks is. We know that the Majin Buu Saga takes place 7 years after the defeat of Cell, as there are several things that tell us this. Chi-Chi herself states to Gohan and Goten that it's been 7 years since she last saw Goku during his death in the Cell games, with the Buu Saga taking place around 7 years after Cell's defeat. This makes Trunks at least 7.5 years old, probably closer to 8 years old during the Majin Buu Saga. So do you see where I'm getting at? But I'll provide further clarification about Dragon Ball's timeline and when certain events take place. Let's look at Battle of Gods, the events that kicked off Dragon Ball Super. The Daizenshu 7 guidebook tells us when certain ages take place in the Dragon Ball timeline. The years that Dragon Ball uses is much different than our own here in the real world. As I said previously, the Daizenshu 7 guidebook tells us the ages that certain events take place. For example, it states the Buu Saga takes place in ages 774, Pan is born in age 779, and Oob appears in age 784, where the end of Dragon Ball Z takes place with Goku flying off with Oob to end Toriyama's original manga. So if we know when Pan is born and how old she is during the end of Dragon Ball Z, that helps us figure out when Battle of Gods takes place. We know that Pan is around 4 years old, maybe almost 5 at the end of Dragon Ball Z, which is in age 784. Pan was born at age 789, thanks to the Daizenshu 7 guidebook we know this. In Battle of Gods, we learn that Videl is in her early stages of pregnancy with Pan, as her help is needed to complete the Super Saiyan God ritual that turned Goku into a Super Saiyan God. With Videl being pregnant with Pan in Battle of Gods, this tells us that Battle of Gods probably takes place around age 778, 4 years after the defeat of Kid Buu. But let's look a little closer, as I'll provide some more context. Neva, the Namekian from the Demon Realm who makes his debut in Dragon Ball Daima, tells us that when gathering the Dragon Balls they've turned to stone because they've recently granted a wish. This is heavily implied to be the wish that Goku and the gang used to make all of Earth forget about Majin Buu, 6 months after Kid Buu was defeated. So if we know that Trunks is around 8 years old in the Buu Saga, and that he's just now turning 9 years old in Dragon Ball Daima, we can easily say Daima is around a year or so after Kid Buu's defeat, and a few years before Battle of Gods and the arrival of Beerus and Whis. But if it's that straightforward, why is everybody so confused? Well, a lot of this confusion is caused by Supreme Kai's and Kibito's defusion, because we actually see them defuse years later during Battle of Gods. In Daima Episode 1, we see Supreme Kai and Kibito state that they defused after Buu inhaled them, using the gas inside of Majin Buu to undo the Batara fusion. But in the Dragon Ball Super manga, we see them unfuse while Goku fights Beerus on Earth after using the Namekian Dragon Balls to wish for them to become defused. So is this a plot hole, a retcon, or just an oversight? Because exactly is going on with this diffusion? Does this make Daima non-canon or a what-if story? No, that's not the case at all. I think the simple answer is that Toriyama clearly wanted Supreme Kai to be one of the main characters in Dragon Ball Daima while not being fused, so he found a way for them to be defused. Now, there could have been better ways he could have accomplished this without causing all this confusion, yes, but there are still ways to resolve it through the writing of Dragon Ball Daima. Does this contradict Super's Batara retcon with a 1-hour time limit, and now Buu being confirmed to be able to also undo Batara fusion? Well, maybe. It's hard to say right now. But I think what will most likely happen at the end of Dragon Ball Daima is that Supreme Kai and Kibito will refuse in some way, and that the following 3 facts about Batara fusion will be true. It's a 1-hour time limit if you are not Supreme Kais, a wish with the Dragon Balls can undo Batara fusion, and being inhaled by Majin Buu can also undo the Batara fusion. But ultimately, we'll just have to wait and see what else Dragon Ball Daima may or may not tell us. But we can definitively say that Dragon Ball Daima is shortly after the Buu saga, around a year, and before Dragon Ball Super. It is not during or after Dragon Ball Super. It is purposely set in those few years after Buu's defeat and before the arrival of Beerus and Whis. It's not meant to be some canon, alternate timeline, or what-if story. They tell us directly when it takes place, with the age of Trunks being his birthday party. There is a bit of confusion surrounding the Batara, but if Kibito and Supreme Kai were to refuse by the end of the series with a proper explanation, it really wouldn't be all that bad with Dragon Ball Super's context in mind. That's information we probably won't know until the end of the series. If you were confused about the timeline, I hope this video cleared some things up for you. If you watched this far and liked the video, please consider leaving a like and a comment, let me know your thoughts on Daima so far, and if you were confused, and if this video helped clear things up for you. Please consider hitting the subscribe button as it helps the channel out a lot. Hope you enjoyed the video. My name has been Champasard, and I'll see you next time.